Hey also fans, me Megashark, and today I'm reacting to Dr. Bob, SCP 2136, an utterly driven scientist. So let's get to it.
The skies above the island are in a frenzy. The air is whipped up, causing the treetops to shake violently. Overhead, a large whirring machine passes, filled with armed men, a white insignia with 3 inward-pointing arrows emblazoned on their uniforms. To them, this is just another mission. To the onlookers below, this is an omen, and it's not the first. It all starts a few days earlier. 2 people living among the indigenous, uncontacted tribe of the Sentinel Islands fall ill. Nobody can figure out what's wrong with them. In the dead of night, their bodies lock up, muscles tense, joints refuse to budge. Even their faces are warped into grim expressions of pain and terror. By morning, the rest of the Sentinelese have found the afflicted pair, and despite their best efforts, there's nothing they can do to treat the sickness.
Oh my goodness.
The helicopter descends, its rotors cleaving branches off trees, carving a hole in the natural environment. Steel-toed boots file off the chopper, stomping against a metal ramp as each soldier exits, weapon drawn. To the shock and horror of the Sentinelese, these strangers roll into their home like a storm. They grab the 2 stricken with the strange illness, pulling them back towards the helicopter. Every scream and protest from the indigenous people is ignored. This is the day that SCP-2136 would be discovered. SCP Foundation satellites were tasked with monitoring the Sentinel Islands after aerial surveillance detected an erratic change of behavior among the uncontacted tribe living there. They were tagged for investigation, and an agent was dispatched to the islands to directly observe the Sentinelese. Their mandate was clear: don't interfere with the locals. Even the Foundation should respect their isolation. That all changed when the agent repeatedly missed the scheduled check-ins with Foundation Operational Command. Having lost contact, it quickly became suspected that there was a visual hazard present on the islands, a situation that called for blind ops conditions. Mobile Task Force ETA 10 was dispatched. This unit, also known by their code name See No Evil, was only deployed to contain, investigate, or neutralize visual cognitohazards and mimetic agents. And what they found on the Sentinel Islands was exactly that. As MTF ETA 10 returned from deployment, one Dr. Heidke was assigned to investigate a potential anomaly, given the provisional designation of 2136. It was his first supervisory role, assigned by Foundation Dr. Richards. Working alongside Heidke would be Dr. Fletcher, an astrobiologist, and Dr. Mazur, an expert in biochemistry, as well as a proficient translator. In his observation journal, Dr. Heidke expressed his excitement at reporting his findings, after an initial quarantine of 96 hours. See No Evil had secured 2 subjects during their operation, the pair designated as 1 and 2. They had also gathered tissue samples from a 3rd, deceased individual, whose corpse had been found alongside the pair. Throughout their capture and transport back to a Foundation facility, both 1 and 2 had expressed a clear desire to not be separated. The 2 subjects were placed under CCTV observation, with Dr. Heidke watching as they sat on opposite beds in a containment room, conversing with each other. Listening in, Dr. Mazur was able to determine that 1 and 2 were speaking in a Bengali dialect, which seemed to suggest they may not have been native Sentinelese. Questioning them via the intercom in their containment room, the research team were able to learn that these 2 were agents working on behalf of the Indian government. They demanded to be released, though the Foundation denied their request. Reaching an impasse, the agents refused to divulge any further information to their captors, though it begged the question: why exactly would India send undercover agents to infiltrate a remote tribe? Just what were they after? And what had they found? By the next day, 1 and 2 were still demanding that they be released, and were even refusing to sleep, seemingly in protest. From Dr. Heidke's observation, neither of them seemed to be exhibiting any outward signs of anomalous behavior or properties. Nothing suggested that either 1 or 2 were experiencing the effects of a visual cognitohazard. Leading Dr. Heidke to wonder if the Mobile Task Force operators had picked up the wrong people. After a long whispered conversation, the pair of subjects requested that someone else be allowed to join them in their cell. One explained that it was too dangerous for them to go to sleep, though refused to elaborate further. Dr. Heidke refused their request unless the pair began cooperating. At 9:30, on the second night of their quarantine, evidence of an anomaly suddenly appeared. Despite one urging his cellmate to stay awake, two drifted asleep. Within a minute, one had fallen to the floor, his body stiffening and rendering him completely immobile. The sound of his fellow agent falling woke two up, and the moment he was once again conscious, one seemed to recover. Both Dr. Heidke and Dr. Fletcher were still examining the subjects and concurred that visual contact was clearly playing a role in the anomalous effect, designated as 2136-A.
Yep.
Later that same night, Dr. Heidke requested that a D-class be assigned to their research team. It was agreed that this disposable member of personnel would be permitted to enter the cell, but in return, subjects 1 and 2 needed to divulge everything they knew to Dr. Masrer.
Yep.
According to their story, an observer working for the Indian government had been watching activity on the Sentinel Islands. Much like the Foundation, they noticed odd behavior among the native Sentinelese. They were keeping themselves in much tighter groups than normal, only ever sleeping in shifts, never letting anyone from the tribe stray off on their own. Even their movements were jerky, uncoordinated, erratic. When the Indian government lost contact with their observer, the two agents were sent to retrieve him. 1 and 2 were able to find the man, but he was already dead, although there were no signs of any struggle. When they attempted to leave, the pair were spotted by the Sentinelese and attacked. During their escape, 1 and 2 seemed to contract their anomalous condition, 2136-A. That's when the Foundation's mobile task force caught them. For explaining what had happened to them, the subject's request was granted. The D-class was placed within their cell under the designation of Subject 3. Dr. Fletcher made sure that nobody outside the containment room saw 1 or 2 as 3 entered. Dr. Heidke even requested the Foundation's Department of Containment to construct an additional exterior door, like an airlock, just in case the cell needed to be opened again. After they were in the room together for 5 minutes, the research team requested that 1 and 2 slowly turn their backs on 3, while keeping each other in view. As they complied, 3 suddenly fell to the ground. Already the anomaly had started to affect him too. 3 was quickly revived when 1 and 2 re-established visual contact, highlighting to Dr. Heidke that not only was the anomaly infectious, but that it seemed to spread through a direct line of sight. He instructed the subjects to sleep in shifts, even electing to have the research team do the same. The last thing the Foundation needed was one of their subjects dying because someone was too sleepy to keep watch. However, both Drs. Heidke and Fletcher didn't get much sleep. The pair stayed up for most of the night discussing the newfound anomaly, debating its infection method and possible point of origin, and all the implications that came with. Dr. Fletcher insisted this anomaly behaved like a virus, though Heidke wasn't convinced there was enough evidence to support this. Eventually, both of them compromised, instead referring to it as a pathogen. As they worked on draft containment measures, describing in detail how the cell housing the 3 infected subjects was to be operated and maintained, Dr. Heidke noticed Dr. Masrer in the reflection of the CCTV monitor. She was napping on a nearby bench. What followed was a long day of testing, with 3 restless subjects on edge after not having had much sleep, and neither had their observers. The trio were unwilling to cooperate until Dr. Heidke told them that testing would help the Foundation find a cure. Over the course of more than 15 hours of tests, Heidke observed a few key details about the anomalous condition. On average, 2136-A took effect within 45 seconds after a subject's line of sight was broken. It seemed that the anomaly wasn't disrupted by reflections or refractions, leading Heidke to request that mirrors be hung in the cell. This would, he hoped, prevent the 3 subjects from ever being out of each other's view. Skin needed to be visible too in order for the anomalous effect not to trigger, leading to the research team requesting the subjects to strip from the waist up. As testing concluded for the day, and the 3 subjects were tasked with hammering hooks to the cell walls to hang up mirrors, nerves seemed to be settling in, worsened by the constant sound of hammering. Dr. Masrer had also made an interesting discovery, one that played on Heidke's mind. She had examined some of the tissue brought back by MTF Edit 10, the samples from the Indian government's dead observer. There were anomalous structures present within the deceased tissue that seemed to suggest the 2136-A effect was the result of some kind of parasite. In the early hours of the following morning, Drs. Heidke and Masrer noticed Subject 2 seemed to be having intense nightmares, twitching and convulsing as he slept. It seemed the infection was gradually degrading his motor functions, even while the other subjects were watching him sleep. Suddenly, Dr. Masra accidentally spilled coffee on Heidke's draft observation logs, apologizing profusely. It was becoming clear that they'd need a backup research team to take over. The lack of sleep was wearing everyone down, researchers and subjects alike. The day's tests didn't run smoothly either, with both 1 and 2 becoming disruptive, refusing outright to comply with instructions. At one point, 2 began lurching jerkily across the cell, shouting something that Dr. Masra translated as, "I can't stop. Help." Testing was outright cancelled later that same day, with both 1 and 2 now staggering around the room, causing Subject 3 to become agitated by their behavior. It appeared to be a new stage of infection. 1 and 2 remained aware and conscious of their symptoms, but unable to control themselves. Their erratic movements were entirely involuntary, and alarmed 3. The D-Class demanded that the other 2 stay away from him, though Dr. Heidke empathized with him. He, too, had been trapped in a small room with 2 other people, and hardly slept. A backup team was scheduled to arrive the next day, though by later that evening, the research team were already feeling their exhaustion weighing on them. Dr. Fletcher appeared so tired he could barely lift a pen. Heidke couldn't even hold cutlery to eat. Inside the cell, Subject 1 and 2 had regained some of their motor functions and stayed mostly sitting still, only ever moving slowly. They had stopped yelling too, only able to speak in a slurred drawl. Subject 3 had crouched in a corner, gripping a hammer from hanging the mirrors the night before. At 11:45 on the night of the 4th day, Dr. Heidke was forced to declare the experiment terminated. All the test subjects were dead.
Oh my god.
In the night, despite his efforts to stay awake, Subject 3 had started succumbing to exhaustion and falling asleep. When he did, both 1 and 2 suddenly stood bolt upright and advanced towards him, their movements now deliberate, controlled. They were repeating a single word, which, according to Dr. Masra, translated as, "Look." Startled, 3 awoke, with the hammer still in his hands. The moment he had killed the other 2, the research team realized quickly what was about to happen next. The effect of 2136-A set in. 3's body began locking up, causing him to drop the hammer. Covered in the blood of his cellmates, his chest stopped moving, and he fell to the ground. He suffocated. Yet the room had been full of breathable air, and the worst part was, it wasn't over yet. Dr. Heidke sent Masra to get help, going against the orders to maintain a 96-hour quarantine. He realized quickly that it wasn't just the test subjects who had been infected. Fletcher must have seen one of them when bringing the D-Class to the cell. He denied it, but when Dr. Fletcher looked away, Heidke started feeling his body shutting down, struggling to move or breathe. If Fletcher hadn't turned back around, the lead researcher would have died. Dr. Masra was only able to get as far as the nearby hallway before collapsing, leading both Drs. Heidke and Fletcher out after her. If they could see each other, stay in view, then they were safe. As their symptoms worsened, Heidke struggled to type, his observation journal becoming riddled with misspelling thanks to his hands spasming. It felt like being helplessly stuck in the passenger seat, like someone else, something else, had taken control of his body. Later that morning, not one of the research team had been able to make their way out of the observation chamber. The backup team still weren't due to arrive for hours, and all Heidke could do was keep his gaze away from Fletcher. The other doctor was watching him, but as long as Heidke didn't turn around, Fletcher couldn't move. Then, within 5 minutes, the anomaly would take effect, and they'd both die. That was the plan. Heidke knew that they had to be dead before the backup team arrived. Otherwise, the researchers would just pass the infection on the moment they saw the new team.
Yep.
The spasms had subsided just long enough for Dr. Heidke to leave a warning in his observation journal. He warned the Foundation that the pathogen they discovered was far more complex than anyone had initially thought. Both Heidke and Fletcher had been mumbling gibberish for hours, seemingly unable to string a sentence together, until Dr. Fletcher suddenly spoke. "Look." He repeated the word, staring at Dr. Heidke and shuffling closer. Without thinking, Heidke closed his eyes. He kept typing in his observation journal, hoping and waiting for his fellow researcher to die, knowing he would soon after too. But Fletcher wanted him to look. The final entry of Heidke's observations read, "He wants me to look, but I can't. I can't look. I can't look. I can't look. I can't look. I can't look." So what exactly is SCP-2136? Explained simply, it is an anomalous pathogen. The contagion itself is impossible to visualize, even through the use of an electron microscope.
Oh my
It's been
goodness.
theorized by Foundation researchers and experts in anomalous virology that the pathogen itself might be so small that it is able to trigger an infection at a subatomic level. Some have even hypothesized that individual photons of light are able to carry this anomalous infection as they bounce off human skin, allowing them to be viewed by other people. As these light particles enter the retina of another human, so too does the infection. SCP-2136 is transmitted through sight. If an uninfected person views someone carrying the pathogen, they will contract it as well. Once SCP-2136 reaches a new host, it immediately begins to take control of their body. Once an infected individual is out of the line of sight of another person, likely to also be a host of SCP-2136, they will start exhibiting the first symptoms of the anomalous illness. The pathogen will begin by targeting the infectee's motor neurons, which transmit signals from the body's central nervous system to the muscles in order to perform movement. SCP-2136 causes the muscles to stiffen suddenly and involuntarily once a host is unobserved. This symptom will rapidly increase in severity until the infectee is rendered completely immobile. The only way to reverse this symptom is if an infected person is observed again by another host of SCP-2136. If this occurs during the onset of the initial characteristic symptoms, then the infectee will rapidly regain control of their motor functions, and their muscles will operate as they normally would. Without observation, however, the pathogen will continue to disable the motor neurons. Given that these neurons also control bodily functions like breathing, subjects are likely to die within an average of 5 minutes. The causes of death that often occur as a result of SCP-2136 infection are typically respiratory failure or circulatory failure. Foundation researchers have noted a distinct similarity between how the SCP-2136 pathogen affects the human body and the anomaly designated as SCP-2218. The latter refers to a collection of individuals with an anomalous condition that causes them to become inanimate mannequins whenever they are observed. An ongoing investigation has been opened into the possible connection between the two anomalies. It's thought, among some researchers, that instances of SCP-2218 may have received their anomalous properties from a modified variant of the SCP-2136 pathogen. Alternatively, another school of thought suggests that the infection itself is derived from the condition that afflicts the SCP-2218 instances. From the moment that they expire, humans infected with SCP-2136 will no longer be capable of passing on the infection. During post-mortem examinations, Foundation morticians have discovered the presence of anomalous organelles, subcellular structures that perform specific functions within cells like organs do within the body. These organelles, it is theorized, are possibly the matured form of the SCP-2136 pathogen. However, their exact function is unknown. It's thought that since they are found within neural cells, which receive impulses and enable the human body to move, that these organelles might have some role in preventing these electrical impulses. Foundation researchers studying the pathogen have found that SCP-2136's composition suggests that it works by absorbing some or all of the electrical impulses sent via a host human's neurons. It has even been suggested that SCP-2136 feeds on electrical impulses, sustaining itself while simultaneously blocking an infectee's bodily function. But Dr. Heidke realized this was wrong. SCP-2136 doesn't just feed on electrical impulses. It stores them, using them to control the bodies of its hosts. The infectee's consciousness becomes an unwilling passenger in their own body, while the pathogen pulls at their limbs like a puppeteer. Processes like talking are more complex, but if SCP-2136 is able to learn how to make a body move, then it can learn how to make one speak. As of now, the Foundation has ordered Mobile Task Forces Eta 10 and Theta 5 to establish a naval perimeter around the Sentinel Islands. All outside contact with the indigenous tribe is prohibited until an effective containment protocol for SCP-2136 can be determined. A final amendment is included in the SCP-2136's entry on the Foundation database. The misspelt sentence reads, "All D-Class hosts died. SCP-2136 is neutralized." Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the
Oh, sorry. Okay, the next one watching is the bubble bath bombs?
It was already the dead of night when the grave robber made his way through the wrought iron gates of the cemetery. He had a shovel in one hand and a worn Hessian sack slung over his shoulder. He knew that in his grisly trade, tonight would be a profitable one. And on that, he was right. Just not in the way he expected.
Oh my gosh.
The grave robber tramped across the grass, surrounded on all sides by headstones, some fresh, some ancient. He whistled a merry tune to himself. If he was afraid of ghosts, this was a line of work that he would never have gotten into. It didn't take him long to find the grave he was looking for. That of a wealthy old woman he'd seen in the obits, a daily ritual that he'd taken to privately referring to as reading the menu. When he found the old bag's grave, he wasted no time digging down through the freshly tamped earth. No matter how many times they'd heard the old cliché, you can't take it with you. In the grave robber's experience, people like this always tried. He'd surely find a wealth of antique jewelry in her coffin, along with her priceless family heirlooms. Well, priceless until he took them all to the local pawn shop and found out how much Vinny was willing to pay for them. He was an industrious digger, and soon the tip of his shovel came into contact with the hard wood of the ornate coffin lid. Beautiful. He cleared the rest of the dirt off the coffin lid and pulled out the small crowbar from his belt to loosen it. As expected, inside he found the desiccated body of a wealthy old lady in an elegant dress. But she didn't seem to have any jewelry. No rings, finger or ear, no necklace, no fancy brooch, nothing. Nada. El Zilcho. The grave robber was ready to call this whole thing a bust, until he noticed something glimmering in the old woman's clenched fist, a flash of silver. He had no shame whatsoever prying open the woman's death grip and discovering what appeared to be a rectangle made of silver foil. But the second it was in his hands, he vanished into thin air in that open grave, the piece of silver foil disappearing with him. Many centuries before this, in some far-flung battlefield, one Viking clan was waging war on another. A Viking warrior woman was in the thick of it, swinging with her great axe into the body of any enemy who was unlucky enough to be nearby. What glory it gave her to offer up these souls to Valhalla. She'd rip and tear until it was all over and done with, and she could drink a toast to victory from her wine bladder atop a pile of enemy corpses. The warrior woman sliced down foe after foe with devastating power. Her father had taught her well. While Odin had not seen fit to deliver him a son, despite his best efforts, he decided that he would not let that stop him from siring a great and terrible force on the battlefield. The Vikings have always been rather equal opportunity when it comes to both giving and receiving violence. In the heat of battle, the warrior woman saw her greatest enemy, Harald the Black-Toothed, so named for his atrocious oral hygiene habits. The same Harald the Black-Toothed who had cowardly murdered her father with an arrow to the back of the head during peacetime.
Oh my God.
It was a death so dishonorable, her father would never be able to join the fabled feasting hall of Valhalla. For that, she would make him pay dearly. The warrior woman ran straight towards Harald, as straight and true as the arrow that had slain her beloved father. She roared for him to face her, and when he did, she swung an axe towards that very face. But Harald was a tricky one. He ducked out of the way, and with one of his keenly sharpened short swords, he sliced the wooden handle of the warrior woman's great axe, the axe head tumbling to the ground. But this was a boon, in a way. It gave her the opportunity to give this wretch a much more meaningful death. The warrior woman reached back and drew the sword that she had sheathed and strapped across her back. Her ancestral sword, her father's sword, and his father's before him, passed down across generations. This would be the perfect sword for her to send Harald the Black-Toothed to his ultimate reward. The battle was hard fought. Even though Harald was a coward and a snake, he was skilled in the art of the blade, but the warrior woman was able to kill him in the end. As she stood over his body, panting and bleeding, the battle around her wound down as her compatriots slaughtered the rest of their foes. Into the purse of the victors went the spoils. It wouldn't be a Viking conquest without a little looting of the dead afterwards. And as the warrior woman searched the body of her fallen enemy, she noticed something strange, a rectangle of glowing silver.
Oh my God.
She grabbed it to study it closer, only to vanish from the battlefield a moment later, never to be seen again. Several hundred years after this, a monstrous killer stalks the streets of foggy London town. decked in a long black cloak and a top hat, the image of the perfect gentleman hiding unimaginable darkness underneath this classy visage. He glides through the streets, a bat out of hell, unafraid, despite the posters all around warning that Saucy Jack could be anywhere, eager to claim his next victim.
Jack.
He can't help but laugh when he sees the police sketches. It looks nothing like him.
So Jack the
While all
Ripper.
those buffoons at Scotland Yard bumble their way through the evidence, Jack danced across the wet cobblestones of Whitechapel, searching for ladies of the evening to satisfy the terrible vices lurking in his black heart. It didn't take him long to find a woman on the street corner wearing a red dress, with a gaunt face and wet, soulful eyes that excited all of his terrible desires.
Oh no.
Yes, she would be the one tonight.
Girl.
He charmed her with sweet words and golden coins, telling her it was dangerous for a woman like her to linger on the streets
Don't
with a killer on the
trust him.
loose. Perhaps she could come and spend the night at his flat in the city. It was much warmer there than out here, after all. Of course, desperate people never require much convincing. It didn't take long for him to spirit her away back to his secluded apartment, and by the time she saw him draw the nickel-plated Liston knife from his coat, it was already too late to escape. He spent the next few hours exploring every inch of her with that knife, and once he felt he'd gotten his money's worth out of her, so to speak, he returned to the foggy streets to dump her body where it would be found in the cold light of the day. The murders thrilled him, of course, but he was almost more excited to see the next morning's headlines. All the penny dreadfuls painting him as some borderline supernatural beast, as deadly as a sharpened blade and impossible to catch as a thin mist hanging in the air. It was all so flattering. As he was preparing to leave for the night and get some rest, his arms always got tired after the strenuous work of the deed, Jack noticed something fluttering through the breeze nearby. Some strange piece of weightless silver. A shred of foil. How odd. He reached out with one of his dexterous, blood-stained hands and snatched it from the air to get a closer look. And despite what all the yellow papers and penny dreadfuls had said, that moment was the only time when Jack the Ripper truly did disappear from the streets of Whitechapel. In the modern day, across the channel, a street mime performed for loose change and a hat on the streets of Paris. Perhaps the only city in the world where the art of miming was actually respected. In theory, anyway. He'd noticed that this newer generation didn't have the same respect for the miming arts as those that had come before. He blamed social media, not that you'd ever hear him talk about it. Out in the public, you'd never ever hear him talk. People ignored him like a leper on the street corner as he climbed an invisible stepladder through the pure medium of physical acting. Maybe he needed something a little more action-packed. He pretended to be a soldier on the front lines of a war, impeccably shouldering his invisible assault rifle, complete with bracing for realistic recoil with every shot, as he assumed a military stance and prowled on the spot. Soon, in what he thought was a truly emotionally devastating moment, he took an imaginary shot to the neck. He collapsed to the Paris streets, miming his death throes as he bled out in an absence of blood. The intensity of it was so great that his beret almost fell off. And still, it seemed as though the sympathies of the faceless throngs of commuters and tourists were not stirred. Had all of his life, his idolization of Marcel Marceau, his time studying at l'École Internationale de Théâtre Jacques Lecoq, been a waste? Perhaps he'd cry if it wouldn't smear his perfect white makeup. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a figure passed by him, moving so quickly that the mime couldn't get a good look at him. But what the mime could see well enough was the strip of silver drifting down into the hat he'd left out for tips. Some kind of invitation, or a ticket perhaps. With the practiced physical theatricality one could only expect from an expert mime, he reached into the hat with his gloved hand and picked the ticket up, only to vanish from the Paris streets, where sadly, nobody would ever notice his absence. Washington, D.C., mid-1960s, the bubbling apex of Cold War paranoia. It seems that everyone is on edge, expecting invasion or outright nuclear devastation at any moment. All except one D.C. politician, who was being led to an expensive hotel room by his tie. The person leading being a beautiful blonde woman in a cocktail dress, giving him bedroom eyes. He's had the most incredible night, and yet, somehow, it seems like it's about to get even better. Still, stumbling and staggering from all the martinis he'd knocked back while living it up with this beautiful stranger at the bar, he hoped he'd still be with it enough to perform. Little did he know, the drugs that the beautiful stranger had slipped him were already taking effect. She'd get exactly what she wanted from him, and she didn't need any kind of conscience to do it. Smash cut forward an hour when the politician is passed out on the luxurious hotel bed, while the beautiful stranger sits at a nearby desk, speaking Russian into a transceiver. She was what an intelligence service would call a swallow, a female spy specialized in obtaining information from key targets with the subtle weapon of seduction, rather than standard infiltration or violence. The male Casanova counterpart is called a raven, in case you were wondering. The politician had been exceptionally talkative back at the bar. The more drinks he knocked back, the more secrets about the military subcommittee he was working on he seemed to spill. How generous of him. As the swallow gave this vital information to her handler, she couldn't help but smile at the fact that her gentleman companion's loose lips were about to sink many American ships. Needless to say, her handler was pleased with the information she'd received, but since she had a key U.S. political asset unconscious, she should see if she could get anything else as a bonus. She didn't have to be told twice. The swallow began searching the politician's clothes for anything else she could use. Some note, some memo, some key or keycard, anything that would further her motherland's goals. Sadly, it didn't seem like he'd had anything interesting on his person until she saw a glint of silver in the inner breast pocket of his coat. Perhaps that could be of interest.
Here we go again.
She reached out and slid it free, only to vanish from the hotel room. The politician would wake up in the morning and have no idea what the hell happened. Someone who was all too keenly aware of what was happening to him was Joey the Mouth, a small-time enforcer for the New Jersey Mafia who'd lived up to his name by turning pigeon for the FBI. Now, he was on the back of the yacht of his former friend and boss, Big Tony, who, along with his goons, was pointing a Glock at Joey. Right about now, he was really regretting not taking that offer to go into witness protection when it was given to him. The gangster life was just so hard to give up. And now it seemed like he was going to die a gangster's death for his trouble. Big Tony didn't want to hear any of the rat's excuses. He'd been lied to and deceived by this little creep for years, giving him a seat at his table while he'd been selling him out to the feds under the table. It was a repulsive breach of the principles of Omerta, and for that kind of transgression, the only possible punishment was death. Joey, still thinking there was some hope of him getting out of this, tried to reason with Big Tony, and he was met with a reply of hot lead from Tony and his goons. The rat's body collapsed back into the ocean and sank beneath the waves as the water around him turned red. Another leak in the organization plugged, as much as it always secretly pained Big Tony to execute a man he would have once called one of his best friends. No honor among thieves. Just as Big Tony was about to order his goons to turn the yacht around back to the nearest New Jersey port, he caught something glinting in the sunlight as it fluttered down towards him. Instinctively, being a man who'd always taken what he wanted in life, he reached out and grabbed it, only to disappear from the yacht right before the eyes of his baffled mooks. But the gangsters weren't the only gunslingers who were about to receive a surprise. 150 years prior, 2 cowboy gunslingers were about to prove that this one-horse town wasn't big enough for the both of them. They stood outside the Snakebite Saloon, itchy hands lingering above the grips of their revolvers. This feud had been coming to a head for years, and deep down, they all knew that it would inevitably end like this. They'd run with different gangs, rustling cattle and shaking down stagecoaches and, later, trains. They'd lost money to one another on gambling schemes. They'd been rivals in love, fighting over women that they'd both fallen for. In gunslinging battles before, they'd even murdered one another's friends. Now, if the extended blood feud was to end, one of their bloods would need to be spilled. But whose would it be? Who would prove himself to be the fastest hand in the West? In the decisive moment, as the 2 cowboys stared into one another's eyes, they went for their weapons. Only a hummingbird could have seen the finer details. Both cleared leather, but only one of the 2 guns was fired. One cowboy fell, a bullet wound in his heart, and a trickle of blood climbing down his shirt as he fell to the ground, darkness claiming him. The surviving cowboy walked over and kicked dust onto his boots, an old cowboy dueling ritual, a sign of respect that let the dead gunslinger's soul pass on to heaven. In death, their feud could be put to rest.
Oh,
Though the
boy.
cowboy noticed something strange about his dead enemy's left boot. Something seemed to be sticking out of the heel, a piece of foil, shimmering silver. Letting his curiosity get the better of him, he leaned in to pick it up, and just as quickly, he was gone. From a void somewhere outside of time and space, 7 people suddenly appeared. The grave robber, the warrior woman, Jack the Ripper, the Parisian street mime, the swallow, Big Tony, and the cowboy. None of them had any natural reason to know each other, separated by time and space and lifestyle, and yet, here they all were, standing together in the dark. Before any of them could think to ask each other what was going on, the lights went up, revealing that they were all standing in a place that none of them could really imagine. The inside of what seemed like a vast factory, but it was unlike any factory that any of them had ever seen. A technicolor assault on the senses, like the vomit you'd produce after eating 5 bags of Skittles and washing it down with the fluid from several cracked glow sticks. Every snaking pipe was covered in polka dots or candy cane stripes. The ground beneath their feet was pillowy pink astroturf. On every side of them, wondrous machines worked to produce impossible toys and candies, sending them down conveyor belts and into boxes marked with the words, Dr. Wondertainment. Short, blue-skinned creatures with bright pink hair, a human-like subspecies known as Minkalinkas, worked diligently to ensure that the boxes were properly sealed and sent on their way. Then, in a puff of purple smoke, a theatrical man in a red coat with a black top hat, a cane, and a monocle appeared in front of the 7 assembled strangers. He doffed his cap and bowed to his guests, introducing himself as the whimsical, wacky, and wondrous Dr. Wondertainment. And he'd brought these 7 exceptional people here for one reason: to take an all-access tour around his one-of-a-kind anomalous toy and candy factory, because they'd all been lucky enough to pick up one of his special silver tickets.
Oh my gosh.
Naturally, they all had questions, but Dr. Wondertainment encouraged them to save those questions until the end of the tour, because there was so much to see and do. In order to smooth over everyone's confusion at being dragged out of their particular social and historical context, he offered them a bowl of delicious-looking pink bonbons to tide them over, an offer which they, at first, reluctantly obliged. But the second each one of them actually tasted the incredible bonbons, they couldn't resist going back for seconds, and thirds, and even fourths. All the while, Dr. Wondertainment, somewhat nervously, asked them to maybe go steady and save some room for the many other candies they'd all get to sample over the rest of the tour. But it was already too late. While Dr. Wondertainment prepared to sing a song about the power of imagination that he'd co-written with Brian Eno and been practicing for the past several weeks, the anomalous qualities of the bonbons began to take effect on the 7 unlucky guests. If they'd just taken one, yes, they would have experienced pink bubblegum-scented foam leaking from the pores of their abdomen, arms, and back, and yes, this foam would be derived from their blood, but it wouldn't have caused any serious harm. However, death from blood loss did occur in 95% of subjects when they consumed 4 or more of the bonbons, as Dr. Wondertainment quickly realized as the 7 guests he'd traveled across time and space to collect began keeling over on the artificial grass. That's why the Foundation has a containment order on this particular candy referred to as SCP-1079, also known by their official brand name, Dr. Wondertainment's Bubble Bath Bonbons. Dr. Wondertainment looked at the 7 exsanguinated corpses lying on the ground in front of him and sighed. What a waste of 7 tickets. Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-1550, Dr. Wondertainment's Custom Pets, Top 12 SCP Animals compilation.
Okay. Look. That's crazy. Okay. For one I'm gonna do is Wendigo Skull.
When Big Rob opened the door to his bar, out on the frosty slopes of the Yukon, a snowdrift rolled in after him. It took him and his wife together to force the door closed again. It wasn't like he had any hands to spare. He was holding a strangely shaped object, carefully wrapped in brown packing paper. None of the regulars looked up as he unwrapped it, too engrossed in either their conversations or their beers. Long-haul truckers, oil rig workers with the weekend off, couples who'd wanted a rugged adventure vacation, and now were vacationing in the world's frosty backwaters. The usual suspects, muttering in English, French, and Algonquin, nursed their whiskeys, the cheapest way to stay warm on these long, cold winter nights. Only one head turned when Big Rob, owner of Big Rob's Tavern, the only watering hole for miles of Canadian hinterlands, wrested the package from the paper. Eddie, a local Algonquin construction worker who propped up the bar from time to time. He felt as though a chill had just swept into the room, not from the cold outside, but something deeper, more intangible. It was the deer-like skull in Big Rob's hand, with a pair of jagged antlers sticking out of the top. A perfect new piece of wall decor between the old license plates and big mouth Billy Basses. But Eddie had heard the stories from the elders. He knew about the hungry horrors that lurk in the dark and felt the ravenous energy that radiated off of that skull. Without a word, he got up from his seat and walked out the front door of the bar into the unforgiving cold of the night. He knew that anything he said would be dismissed as superstition, but he also knew that anyone left in that bar was as good as dead, and he refused to be among the corpses. Well, if there even were other corpses. Big Rob didn't pay any attention to Eddie's exit. He was too focused on getting the skull up on the wall. Ever since he'd collected it from the post office, he was feeling oddly hungry. Maybe just because he skipped lunch. Once the skull was presiding over his bar, he could get himself some dinner and rid himself of the gnawing pain in his gut. At first, nobody seemed to even notice it was there. The seconds turning into minutes, and those minutes slowly ticking towards the first hour. It wasn't until that first hour passed that the patrons and staff of Big Rob's Tavern started to act a little strangely. They became twitchy, on edge, itching at their skin and scratching at the wood of their tables or the bar. The rockabilly music playing out of the nearby jukebox was soon replaced by a low groan of empty stomachs, the raw sound of hunger. Drool dripping from slack jaws. Slowly, eyes around the bar began to turn towards the mounted skull, staring down at them all with that eyeless stare. They heard whispers deep inside their own skulls. Honor your hunger, my children. It's all for you.
Oh my god.
Eat.
Yeah.
Their minds were filled with images. Meat, red, bloody, raw, delicious. The patrons looked around and met each other's eyes. Yes, my children, said the voice. Take up my mantle and become who you were meant to be. Around the bar, everyone drew weapons. Some were lucky enough to have brought switchblades and buck knives and K-bars. Others had to make do with cutlery, broken bottles, or whatever other sharp or heavy objects were close to hand. The skull seemed to watch, indifferent, as the patrons descended on each other in a fit of animalistic rage. Not a word exchanged, just growls and screams, a sacrament of blood and terror, of teeth sinking into exposed flesh, as the patrons and staff attacked and scrambled over each other. All of them were hoping for one thing, to get their hands on that beautiful, precious skull, the one that had whispered these beautiful, sweet ideas into their minds. They would honor their hunger and honor their great and terrible master. It seemed appropriate that it was Big Rob himself, bloodied and injured, who climbed on top of the sprawling pile. He prized the skull away from the wooden panels with broken fingernails and brought it up to his face. He didn't know why, just that it was what he needed to do. And the second he felt the strangely warm bone against the cold skin of his face, the transformation began in earnest. The man that was once Big Rob was gone. When the skull touched his face, his tissue started melting onto the bone, bonding on a molecular level. His body began to seize and spasm, spine ramrod straight, as the other patrons of the bar instinctively backed away, sensing a true apex predator in their presence. They could hear the sound of Rob's bones cracking from outside the bar, his arms and legs jerking and twisting at impossible angles as they began to lengthen out. His skin took on a mottled hue as coarse, scratchy follicles forced their way out of his pores. When Rob screamed in pain, it echoed out of the skull as a terrible, primal howl. His bottom jaw also cracked and stretched, revealing a seemingly bottomless maw full of needle teeth.
Yeah.
Long, razor-edged claws forced their way out of his toes and fingertips, and the skull's antlers seemed to stretch out and fill the sky. He'd been ripped and warped into this obscene creature, a dark echo of a human, rail-thin, corpse-like. Nobody else in the bar could even move before its terrible majesty. Then, the feeding began. He reached out with one of his unnaturally long arms and grabbed the nearest patron, still bloodied from the fight. He would do. The unfortunate patron was about to squeeze out the first third of a scream before the monster's jaws closed around his face. Hours later, a task force of the SCP Foundation would arrive on the premises. They wouldn't be the first ones called, of course. Several members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived on horseback in response to reports of screaming and sounds of violence coming from Big Rob's tavern. The SCP Foundation took an interest when those Mounties never reported back, and neither did the second team of Mounties sent to provide reinforcements to the first. What the team discovered was the aftermath of a horror story. The half-ruined remains of the tavern, filled with bloody bones and scraps of fabric. The walls were peppered with rifle shots from the Mounties before whatever was inside came bursting out of the front door. What happened to the Mounties was reasonably clear from the huge red patches soaking into the snow. Their mounts hadn't been spared either, as was illustrated by the tattered saddles and discarded horseshoes in the snow.
So hungry you could eat a horse. Or several, I guess,
said the squad leader as he engaged his night vision viewfinder.
That's so
Nobody
funny.
laughed. Not even him. On the way down, they'd encountered Eddie, bundled up in his coat. One of the MTF squad members had stopped to ask him if he had any idea what was going on, and he had but one terse word for them.
When to go.
When to go.
Back at the ruined tavern, the dying lights of the building cast the dense Canadian forest behind it as a castle of dancing shadows. You didn't need to be a detective to notice the chain of oversized red hand and footprints leading back into the tree line.
Yeah.
Clearly, whoever had turned all these poor people into a buffet had retreated into the forest to digest.
Okay,
said the squad leader as he shouldered his assault rifle.
Yep.
let's go give our hungry diner his just desserts. Keep a tight formation. Helmet cams on, comms
Be
open.
careful.
Separation is death out here.
The team complied, around 10 of them in total, all experienced operatives of the SCP Foundation that had encountered violent and terrifying anomalies before. Each had a high-powered assault rifle with several extra magazines on their person, a combat knife, and even a couple grenades affixed to each of their belts, just in case. But as they marched into the forest, the narrow beams of their helmet flashlights cutting through the seemingly infinite dark, they couldn't help but wonder whether it would be enough. Even in the frigid temperatures of midwinter, the squad could feel an immense heat emanating from somewhere in the forest. None of them had any idea what they were up against, and could only hope that bullets would even harm it. The cursed object behind it all would later be designated SCP-323, the Wendigo Skull, named for the Algonquin legend of a spirit of dark hunger. But out here, to the team on the ground, it was just an unknown horror in the wood. They kept searching, beams leaping from tree to tree, trying to triangulate the source of every rustled leaf or cracking twig. Shadows danced in their crosshairs, sweeping for anything that might have been the source of the chaos they'd seen back at the tavern.
Yeah.
The mobile task force agent trailing the pack, Emil Vasquez, was so focused on keeping up with the team, he didn't even notice the long-fingered hand descending from the canopy. All his teammates heard was a muffled yelp and a meaty crunch, as the man they'd been on so many missions with was devoured in the dark. The other trailing squad members turned and opened fire, bullets ripping through the trees, but failing to come into contact with anything made of flesh and blood. Moments later, a long, loping figure charged through the center of the team formation, impossibly strong for its emaciated build, and raked a claw through the air. One of the team members was a little too close, and died when the claws slashed his flesh. The squad leader was only slightly luckier, the claws wounding him in the stomach, knocking him against a nearby tree. With the leader down, formation broke, and the surviving team members tried to find refuge in the dark. They had no idea that what they were fighting and trying to evade was so much more than just another monster of flesh and blood. It was a dark god of pure appetite, bound to a physical object, in this case, the deer-like skull. For most, the last thing they saw before jaws closed around them were the warped shadows of antlers cast in the beams of their flashlights. The forest rang now with gunshots and screams. Little by little, even these fell silent as the Wendigo claimed its meals. They'd sent mere men to subdue a beast older than history, and would likely be here long after humanity had eaten each other down to the last man, a process that the skull hoped to hasten.
Washington! Vasquez! Hodder! Anyone!
The squad leader barked into his mouthpiece. There was no reply. The dull ache from the wound in his gut was growing as the adrenaline wore off, every step carrying him further into the dark copse of trees where so many other animals had once wandered off to die. Between every step and the crunches of snow that came with them, he could hear that thing out in the trees, moving with speed that even his well-honed reflexes couldn't hope to match. If it could find him, it would devour him like all the others before reinforcements could arrive. And even with almost no ammunition left, his gun felt like it was getting heavier and heavier by the moment. That's when he tripped on a root beneath the snow and collapsed against a nearby tree. He willed himself to get up, to keep fighting, but it was like his nervous system was ignoring his commands. As he bled out, his legs lost all sensation. He thought dying out here in the snow would be cold, but no, a feeling of terrible calm and warmth washed over him. He blinked, and suddenly, the shape was crawling towards him out of the darkness of the trees and into the illumination of his helmet light. As it climbed up the length of the squad leader's body, he smelled its breath, stinking of sweet rot, needle teeth shining. But the squad leader smiled and gave a quiet laugh, something that seemed to confuse even the antlered horror, until it looked down and saw the grenade clenched in the squad leader's fist, the pin already pulled.
Bon appetit!
The explosion shook the forest. The burst of flames gave the Foundation helicopters in the distance something to fly towards. They'd been watching a live feed of the doomed squad's helmet cameras to understand the monster they were up against, seeing each of their comrades fall in the process. But in doing so, they'd brought this night of horrors to a close. When the reinforcements rappelled down from the choppers into the epicenter of the blast, they found the charred corpse of Big Rob. The comms crackled into life.
Target neutralized.
A flashlight scanned the surrounding area. A few feet away from Big Rob's mangled corpse lay the deer-like skull that had been affixed to his head, completely unharmed by the explosion. The Wendigo skull was taken and put into containment, given the Euclid class for its unpredictable nature. To this day, it sits in the bowels of a Foundation containment site, hungry for another human connection, hungry to once again bestow its terrible gift, and above all, just hungry.
Yep.
Check out the Dr. Bob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob.
Thanks, Dr. Bob. That'll be it for now, awesome fans. Don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment down below. Have a nice day, awesome fans. Bye.